Hi everybody, my name is Jason and I lead the team at GovTech called Government Digital Services. We run something like 50 odd different project teams working with government agencies across the Singapore government to enforce and to advance the agenda of digitalization. Today I'm joined by Boon. Boon is one of my colleagues, and maybe I'll leave him to say a little bit more about what he does in GovTech.
Thank you, Jason. I'm Boon, and I lead the Sensors and IoT Capability Center in GovTech. And like Jason, we are both very involved in the TraceTogether project. He does the app part, and I do mainly on the hardware and the token side of things.
Yeah. So it's really been one of those years. It's been a super busy year. I mean, Boon mentioned we've both been on the TraceTogether program. But besides TraceTogether, I think there's been many other things that GovTech has been working on, right? From facilitating distribution of masks to supporting safe distancing measures, helping residents, temperature scanners, the spot-on thermal scanners, helping residents and businesses access financial assistance packages. So it's been one new challenge after another. And I think we're just really excited to be taking a break from all of the busyness to share with you some of the work that our teams have been doing and to answer as many of your questions as possible. So one key program I think that we mentioned earlier is TraceTogether. It's the world's first national Bluetooth contact tracing program, and it comprises the app. We developed this in 8 weeks. We launched it in March. The hardware tokens, Boon was working on that. That was launched in June. And I think that just provides a little bit of context for where we might address some of your questions today. So without further ado, I'm just going to dive into some questions. We've already gotten some questions coming in. So let's see. Okay. So question one, TraceTogether was built on a really tight timeline. 8 weeks, like I said earlier. Where did the idea come from, and what were the biggest challenges? So I think the idea for TraceTogether came about, the germ of an idea actually came about from an interagency meeting in 2015. And that was was a meeting chaired by Minister Vivian Balakrishnan. Minister Vivian was in charge of the Smart Nation movement. And one of the ideas back then was, with MERS affecting Singapore, how could we use digital technology to improve contact tracing? Now, there was a germ of an idea there, but I think, we really seized on it and took it up again in January this year when we had the first reported case of COVID-19 in Singapore. This was on the 23rd of January. And since then, it's been, a long string of challenges. We had challenges to do with working with Bluetooth on mobile devices, challenges with working with Bluetooth on hardware devices. But I think along the way, we've been really, really heartened by the support that we've gotten from our colleagues here in GovTech, but also from the Ministry of Health, right? Because at the end of the day, what we need to do is to make sure that this technology is built so that it's fit for purpose, right? That it works for public health. And that requires close collaboration and coordination and communication between the development teams, both on the software and the hardware side, as well as our business users. In this case, this would be the Ministry of Health. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
I think challenges, there are technical challenges and also implementation, operational challenges. And I think they are all equally challenging for all of us, right? Especially on the token side of things. That leads to the second question, which is what are the interesting technical questions that we have encountered in the app and the token side, right?
Yeah. Do you want to share with us? I mean, hardware, I think, is a particularly difficult and challenging field, and the compressed timeline that you guys had to roll out the tokens, it's no mean feat.
Yeah, so you guys had a head start, right? You all came out with the first app, and you all actually had some success in getting millions of people to download, and then we were asked to say, let's get a token to work with yours as well, right? Okay. So that was done.
Tall order.
Yeah, that was a tall order. It just came to us, and then it came, and we did it over the weekend. We were able to talk to the phones and able to transact the way it was written in the Blue Trace protocol, and then we then quickly say, okay, the big challenge would then be, how do we compress it down into a portable device? Then there's a lot of ask from everybody on how it should look like. Yep. How light should it be? What kind of battery should it have?
The AirPod form factor in the
AirPod form factor, or should it have rechargeable batteries? Remember? Initially there was a lot of talks about what kind of hardware should we put in? Should we have GPS? Should we have a barometer and all these things? And
So just to be clear, no GPS chip, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the
Alright.
end, we say let's just go the basic, right?
Yep.
Just Bluetooth contact tracing. Yeah. So then, I mean, once we design it out, the big challenge is getting the hardware, right? And unlike the app where once you get the software written and you publish it, it can pretty much be downloaded the next day and start being used the next day, right? For hardware is different. You come out with the firmware, you got a prototype that works, then you need to then procure the materials and set up the factory lines and all this to start manufacturing. And that usually takes about 12 weeks of lead time. So it's not like, okay, this is good, let's do it. You know, it's 12 weeks later, then you see the first.
So what were some of the critical enablers that allowed you to really compress that timeline down? Because I think, you know, in private sector, when you think about TVs, consumer electronics devices, the lead times are usually in the, you know, close to a year, if not more than a year, easily.
Yeah. So the big advantage we had was that we had a contract manufacturing tender that we already had previously, a period contract. And it came in a timely manner. So that was already approved and awarded. And so when we wanted to do the token, we were able to quickly engage this contract manufacturing tender. We didn't have to go through the whole government tender process, and we can say, okay, we come out with the design, we pass it to them and say, manufacture it real quick for us.
Okay.
And that got us to the first thousands of prototype really fast. Then of course, when it goes to the big volume, then we have to then do a proper tender. And,
you know,
that
actually,
buy us some time.
This reminds me of a point that I think P.S. Chicken mentioned in his earlier panel discussion, where he was talking about the need to overcome some of the bureaucratic strictures. I think procurement is one of those areas where that's actually an important challenge that we need to address in order to drive the Smart Nation movement forward. I guess, you know, maybe just taking the other half of this question, on the app side, I think the difficulties were really that, you know, we are using Bluetooth technology. It's an established technology. It's been around for 20 over years now. What was different is using Bluetooth technology to establish peer-to-peer proximity and doing this in a way that respected privacy sensitivities that our users might have. You know, we wanted the system to be very much consent-driven. We also wanted to make sure that we could provide, you know, accurate information. And I think I remember very distinctly, this was a Saturday, it was the 8th of February when we had our first prototype working. And then we realized that we couldn't take it for granted that different phones were transmitting at the same signal powers. And sometimes the differences is 1, 2, maybe even 3 orders of magnitude. And what that meant is that we had to engage the help of our colleagues from the Infocom and Media Development Authority, from the, you know, from A-Star. We borrowed, you know, a test chamber from them, and we basically calibrated all the phones that we had access to, borrowed phones from, you know, our friends, our family, brought them in, and really combining all of that with, you know, a cryptographic security understanding. I think all of these things had to be brought together in a relatively short amount of time, and I think that was really one of the big challenges that we had to surmount. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay. Let's see. I see
to...
another question coming up here. Let me just read it out. What's the cost of the tokens? Okay. Simple question. Hopefully, this is a simple answer.
Yeah. So it's going to be a very simple question. Simple answer to a simple question. It's going to, if you have been to the movies recently, then the cost of the token is actually less than the price of
so you're
standard
talking
movie
about
ticket.
less than
$10, yeah.
Okay.
So it took us a while to get
for the cost of a movie token, sorry,
movie ticket.
For the cost of a movie ticket, you can protect yourself, others around you, your loved ones, and your family, as well as the community, from, you know, from basically inadvertent exposure or unwitting exposure to COVID-19.
Yeah.
Okay.
So maybe go to the next question is how do we intend to recycle the tokens, right? Like we have, I mean, we are actually building millions of tokens now. Especially recently, there's a huge demand for it. There's long queues in the CCs and all this. And of course, we talk about how are we going to use them after this project, right? So the good thing is that because we designed these tokens, we actually own the firmware as well as the design. We then can repurpose it by writing a new firmware to it. There are some plans to use this as the future standards for IoT devices, IoT communication and all this for the government. Right? Simply because, like what you said, we have done a lot on the cryptography side of things, the security side of things, and to protect the privacy side of things, right? And we find that the knowledge gained from this is going to be very useful for us moving forward. And so the platform, the tokens now becomes a platform for us to continue to build on this, implement it for all government projects that are relevant.
So we're not just thinking about the short term here, we're actually, our plans actually extend quite a few years into the future.
Yeah, I can give you a quick example is you can potentially use these tokens and use them as asset tagging. Right? You can attach one of these tokens to any of your valuable assets, and then that will broadcast the information, the asset information once maybe every few minutes or something like that. But that gives you the power to then go into a room. Instead of having to count every single asset that you have, you can just have a scanner and then just immediately know what is inside. Right. So it's very efficient for somebody who does audits and all this. Right. So that can be done by using this technology.
And given the amount of transshipment and warehousing that happens in industry in Singapore, I think this could be something that's of a lot of interest to industry.
Very interesting, and you can do it in a very secure manner, and yet at a very low cost.
Right. Okay. Let's see. All right. I think we've been fed this next question. How do you think the Singapore government was able to build these suite of digital tools beyond TraceTogether so quickly? Okay. So beyond TraceTogether, let me try and take a stab at this question. I think the answer is actually it's the same answer for both TraceTogether as well as all of the other things that we've been working on, which is that over the last maybe slightly under a decade, but building from the IDA of old National Computer Board, we've really been investing in our ability to digitalize in government. And I think in recent years, the emphasis has been much greater, partly spurred because of the Smart Nation movement. But the idea here is you need to hold some of these engineering capabilities intrinsic to the organization, because you will not always be able to engage in outsourced procurement, especially where the needs, the requirements are constantly evolving. So if I take TraceTogether as an example, when we built it, there was no, this was not in the playbook that public health had for how to deal with a pandemic. But it is something that is now going to feature in Singapore's response plans for any future pandemic going forward, right? And it's got both the software and the hardware component. This is something that I think is unprecedented. No other country has done this. And the reason we're able to do this is because we have that internal resource. And as the situation is evolving, as the requirements are evolving, the development teams are able to adapt their solutions to meet these needs. So I think really the answer to this question, that's probably it. I don't know, Yang Boon, do you want to add anything?
I think you brought it up very well. It's the capability that we have been building over the years, right?
Right, and it's a long-term investment.
It's a long-term investment, and we always get asked like, oh, why don't you just get a contractor in China or India to do it, right? There's always these questions, right? They can do it cheaper, but we found that during this COVID period, then it really brought the point where, in times of crisis, right, you're actually on your own, right? You cannot really count on someone else out there to come in and save you.
And it's not even in the digital space, because I think there was talk about like mass shipments being diverted from countries. So at the end of the day, yes, we are in a globalized society, but we do need to have some strategic capability within our own.
Yeah, and although we have been we have been building like IoT capabilities, hardware capabilities, app capabilities, right? And it's true that you can hire someone in other countries to do it for you. But if we didn't have that capability, we would never have come out with the TraceTogether program or the tokens in such a short time. We would never have been able to even define or even figure out that this is possible, right? That's because of the knowledge that we have. And of course, from the lessons we learn now, we want to keep building on this and ensure that Singapore is capable enough to stand on our own in future.
Yeah, I think that last point is an interesting one, right? It's about helping Singapore, helping us as an organization, helping the government, helping the country have some wherewithal to be able to stand on our own and basically be ready for crises that might come up from time to
That's
time.
correct.
All right. Okay. Do you want to have a look at the next question?
No, next one is for you.
Okay, let's see.
6, yeah.
What is TraceTogether only safe entry? If TraceTogether is effective, why must we do safe entry check-in? Let me see. I'll try and take a stab at this. So I think we need to differentiate between TraceTogether and safe entry. And there's been actually a great deal of confusion around what the difference is between these two systems, right? They're both produced by GovTech. They both support the pandemic response. We work with the Ministry of Health very closely on both of these solutions. But I think at the end of the day, TraceTogether estimates your peer-to-peer proximity. So between Yang Boon and myself, we are able to estimate that we've got about, maybe 2 meters of distance between us. We are socially, we are safely distanced from each other. Whereas safe entry doesn't address the question of who, it addresses the question of where.
That's correct.
Which is, if there is a coronavirus patient that is in location A, maybe Starbucks or Coffee Bean or what have you, how do you know who else was in that same space? And it need not be within a 2-meter range. It could actually be further, but there is still some risk. And what MOH is interested in doing is to also reach out to these people to provide them advice, provide them guidance. And that is what the safe entry data is used for. Now, TraceTogether only safe entry, I think, is basically our assessment that both of these systems complement each other. They both do different things, and we want to bring them together and integrate them. And right now, when you enter a public location, when you go into a shopping mall, you already have to do the safe entry check-in. What we are trying to do now is to integrate TraceTogether into that requirement so that as you enter these crowded public places, where the risk of being infected by, being exposed to the virus is higher, that we both have the TraceTogether solution to protect you, yourself, your family members, but we also have safe entry, and we will use both of these solutions to help manage, the risk, to help identify potential infectious exposures, and to basically protect, our citizens, our residents, and help Singapore to combat COVID-19.
Yeah, I think we can say they are equally important, and they do different things, right? I think one quick analogy might be that TraceTogether helps me figure out if I come close to you, but safe entry will be, say, for example, maybe I didn't come close to you, but I might have used the same table that you have been to, right? Even though you have left like half an hour ago, but I might use the same table, but the virus is still there. Yeah, I could have contracted it too.
That's right.
Yeah, so maybe we go to the next question.
Okay.
I can take the next question, which is, how do you prevent malicious actors deploying beacons to track the tokens? Hypothetically, anyone can deploy rogue gateway device to collect information, correct? So yes, this question is a very interesting one. It's also very correct. Technically, from a technical perspective, Bluetooth is a very common technology, and it's true that you can easily acquire a sniffer to sniff out anybody that has Bluetooth devices near you, which includes our tokens and your phones, right? And of course, you can also create a Bluetooth device to broadcast like malicious information, right? That is on the technology side of things. But then when we implement this, that's where all the cryptography, all the security and the privacy implementations are then in place. So on the token side of things, we work with cybersecurity agency and plus our GovTech cybersecurity capability center, DSO as well as DSTA. They all send their top engineers down to work with us to work on the privacy and the security side of things. And I always joke about with my team that, before this token thing, right? I always felt that cybersecurity is, sometimes they just bog us down and all these things, right? Sometimes it's more than a burden. But no, actually, I changed my mind now. I'm actually a big advocate of cybersecurity now. They were very invaluable in their contributions. So they came in, they highlighted some of the risks, and not only they highlighted the risks, they came up with solutions, right? The way we broadcast, how do we encrypt it? I think it's the same for both the app and the token. Our Bluetooth identity, right, is being encrypted,
Yep.
right? And in fact, what is being encrypted is not even your identity. It's very much a number
It's
that tags
another
to
assigned
you.
string.
Yeah, that is actually stored inside our cloud. But then even whatever we broadcast, right, is changing every 15 minutes.
Yep.
It changes every 15 minutes. So somebody with a sniffer will have at most 15 minutes to track you. And even with the road gateway, right, if they have a gateway that records everything that is being broadcast by the phones or the tokens, right, there's no way they can decrypt it, right, because they have no key, no security keys and all this. There's no way they decrypt it. Even after they decrypt it, right, it's a bunch of numbers that doesn't mean anything to them, right? The way for them to get any useful information is to actually hack into the government cloud, right? That's significantly harder to do. Yeah. So for the token side of things, we are going for this cybersecurity agency level 4 certification, which is the highest that you can get. And back to the same question again, you're able to do it at such a low cost. I thought it was pretty amazing. Yeah.
So I think I mean, if I just jump on, it's really the fact that we were conscious of the need to protect citizens' data from the very beginning of the program. Way back in February, we had these discussions with all of the cybersecurity agencies in Singapore, agencies with expertise in cybersecurity. This idea of encrypting the identifiers that are broadcast. So unless you have the secret, the key, you actually have no ability to pull useful information out of what is actually being broadcast by the tokens. And the second is, even if you were just interested in tracking the tokens through space and time, actually you can't do that as well, because the tokens are also, together with the apps, they're constantly changing the identifiers that are broadcast. Yeah. Okay, we've got about 8 minutes left. We'll see if we can do maybe 2 or 3 questions. And let me just move to the next question here. So this next question is, what happens if you use TraceTogether to check into a location and then immediately check out and subsequently remain in the same location for more than 30 minutes? I think the answer to this is, look, when you use TraceTogether to check into a location, or actually, if you do a safe entry check-in, it could be using TraceTogether or any other modality that is available to you, and you check out and remain in the same location, I guess the answer is most likely you will not be flagged as being a close contact or being a potential contact of interest to an index patient that has visited that particular location, if indeed such a patient did visit the same place that you were at. And I think at the end of the day, we also have to remember that all of these solutions that we are developing, they're not silver bullets. Right? And we've said, on the TraceTogether program, we've said in multiple forums that TraceTogether is not a panacea, it's not a silver bullet. There will always be a need for humans over the loop, looking at the data that is generated, continuing to do interviews to find out, what the facts on the ground are, and just either validating the information or supplementing the information that we get through the systems. And so if we have a record of the check-in, right, but it's not for the full 30 minutes, that may still warrant a follow-up, conversation with MOH contact tracers, and they will exercise human discretion, because the notion of what constitutes close contact is not a static notion. I mean, the virus doesn't travel between people carrying a yardstick that's exactly 2 meters long. It's far more discretionary than that.
Yeah. So I think to add on to your point, right. Whatever technology that we can come out with, right, is not foolproof. It's not a silver bullet, and we still need the cooperation of the people to help to make it work, right? So if you deliberately just check in and check out immediately, but you still stay there, right, and you know that you have not done the check in and check out for the duration of the stay there, then there's nothing we can do to go bypass the human deliberation to try to beat the system.
Yeah.
Right. So, okay. The next question will be: how do we protect the users' privacy and ensure all this data on TraceTogether is not abused? Further to that, how can we ensure this is used responsibly so that it does not become a mega spying tool? So I think we addressed that previously.
We did, yes.
Yeah, this is one of the first. This is one of the first criteria we think of.
Yep.
One of the first philosophy that we have always upheld.
Yes.
Right. So protect the people's privacy, ensure that because we know very well that without the people trusting the government on the privacy, on how we are responsible in privacy and all this, the adoption rate is going to be bad, right? In fact, that's the reason why we have never mandated the need for the download and the tokens, right?
Yep.
Everything is voluntary. And in order for us to encourage the people to come up, to step up voluntarily and collect the tokens or download the app, we know that we have to respect their privacy. We have to not abuse the trust that the government has given us. And that really ties down to the integrity that we have, and we just have to stay fast on this and not abuse this.
Yeah.
So maybe move on to the next question.
Yeah, I just maybe if I can just add, I would say, we've talked about the need to bring in radio engineering expertise from outside of GovTech. We talked about the need to involve agencies with cybersecurity expertise as well. I mean, very early on in the TraceTogether program, we also involved our colleagues from the Government Data Office, administering, the governance processes for data sharing, data collection, data use in government. We also had, conversations with the Personal Data Protection Commission, as well as a group of industry advocates on data privacy.
As well as our teardowns, as well as the open sourcing. Yes.
So open sourcing, letting people see what's in the tokens, letting people see what's in the source code for the app itself. I think all of these things were done in order to build trust. At the end of the day, this is what it amounts to.
That's correct.
Right? And trust is really, really critical for public support and adoption. I think it's something that we've been driving, pretty much from day one. So the system is consent-driven. We take pains to protect the data that we keep within the system. We minimize the amount of data that we collect. So it's really the bare minimum that is needed in order for us to link back to test results that are coming in from testing laboratories in Singapore, integrated in with a whole ecosystem of systems that MOH has stood up as part of its digital transformation efforts, right? So I think, let's see, we've got 3 minutes left. Maybe I'll just
go to the last question.
Right, I see one last question down here. What is the long-term vision for TraceTogether? Okay, and maybe I'll just say a little bit here, and Young Boon, if you want to add in, I think you mentioned a little bit of the platform already, but I think that's probably a good time to round up here. I think, if you go back to January this year, to be honest, when the team and I were working on TraceTogether, I think the idea back then was really a very modest one. It was built around the idea of taking a consumer technology that was widely available and thinking, is there a way that we could deploy this to support public health in a time of unprecedented crisis? When we're facing this pandemic, it's once in a lifetime. And we thought, to be honest, that when we launched the app, because we had seen examples in much smaller communities around the world, research institutions had played around with this technology before, we thought that we would be really lucky to have something like 5% adoption. We had 10% adoption nationwide on day one itself. And right now, I think the system has more than 50% adoption in Singapore. We've got more than, I think it's 1.2 million tokens distributed so far. On the app side, it's been downloaded more than 3 million times. Now, obviously, there's some overlap between the two, but we can confidently say that more than half of Singapore residents are on the system. And I think that speaks volumes for where we are in terms of our trust in government, where we are in terms of our smart nation journey, using technology to support pandemic response. But I think the longer term vision here is really that we are really setting out to prove that a widely available technology like Bluetooth can be applied for public good. And I think we have done that. We have inspired other systems around the world, other countries, companies, the tech giants have come on board with this idea. They've developed their own system. Whether Bluetooth becomes the technology that is used 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road when the next pandemic comes around, or whether it's going to be something else, I think remains to be seen. But I think this has been firmly planted into the popular imagination that here is a potential use case, certainly for the apps. And I think maybe, Young Boon, if you want to talk about what this means for the hardware side of things.
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be Bluetooth, right? It can be any technology. Maybe in the decades down the road, something better or cheaper can be used for contact tracing. But I think the idea is the exhibition of the capability to be able to do it and do it at a fast time. For me, the token is going to be the platform for secure IoT implementation
Right.
for the whole government. So it's quite clear for me there is a long-term vision for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I think
right.
we've addressed this question. I know there are many other questions that we haven't gotten the chance to address. I think there is a Friends of TraceTogether link that we can share. Right, I think you're seeing that at the bottom of your screen now. So if you're interested in keeping up with what's going on within the program, I think that's a potential
Yes.
link
Friends
there.
of TraceTogether.
Friends of TraceTogether. So thank you very much for your time today. We hope you had a good time listening to us, and we are very happy and proud to be able to share some of the work that we've done with you.
Thank
and
you.
with that, I think
Yep.
on behalf
Please
of the two of us,
download
signing off.
the app and collect the tokens. All right.
All right. Okay.